The council chamber stretched high above the marble floors, its ceiling painted with scenes of conquest and glory. 5,000 years of those painted scenes, each one showing the Galactic Council's victories over rebellion, over chaos, over anyone who dared to question their authority. Councillor Vexthar sat in his elevated seat, his scaled fingers drumming against the armrest as he listened to the day's reports with half his attention. The reports were always the same. Production quotas met, trade routes secured, minor disputes resolved. The machinery of empire ran smoothly, as it had for millennia. Vexthar's eyes wandered to the lower seats where the subject species sent their representatives. Most seats were empty today. The representatives knew their voices meant nothing here. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the human section, her gray suit plain and unremarkable. She clutched a datapad against her chest and kept her eyes downward. Vexthar barely registered her presence. Humans were like that, he thought. Present but forgettable. They had joined the Council's domain 300 years ago, and in all that time, they had caused no trouble worth remembering. The human sectors report standard efficiency, an aide announced, reading from a glowing display. Agricultural output is at 98% of quota. Manufacturing continues on schedule. No incidents to report. Adequate, Vexthar said, waving a dismissive hand. The humans have learned their place well. They were fractious when they first arrived, but time has domesticated them properly. Several other counselors made sounds of agreement. One of them, a floating creature from the methane world, spoke through a translator. Their technical skills remain useful. They maintain our systems without complaint. As they should, Vexthar replied. We gave them peace, stability, and purpose. In return, they serve. A fair exchange. Sarah Chen wrote something on her datapad, her expression unchanged. No one looked at her. No one ever did. The session continued for another 3 hours. Plans were made for anniversary celebrations. 5,000 years of unbroken rule deserved proper ceremony. Resources would be diverted from several sectors, including the human ones. No one objected. No one ever objected anymore. When the session finally ended, Sarah Chen gathered her materials and walked quietly toward the exit. She passed through corridors lined with guards, none of whom gave her a second glance. She was just another faceless diplomat from a conquered world, after all. Outside, the capital city of Apex Prime sparkled under 3 suns. Towers reached toward the sky, built by 1,000 different species, all serving the same masters. Sarah walked to a public transport station and waited with a crowd of other beings. She looked at her datapad again, scrolling through what appeared to be agricultural reports. Anyone watching would see nothing interesting. But embedded in those reports, invisible to casual observation, were other messages. Messages that had been building for decades, for centuries even. Across the galaxy on a world called Earth, morning light touched the eastern continents. People woke and went about their daily routines. They ate breakfast, kissed their families goodbye, and headed to work. Nothing seemed unusual about this particular day. But in millions of homes, people checked their messages with unusual care. They watched certain entertainment programs that seemed ordinary, but contained specific patterns in their editing, their music, their dialogue. To anyone else, these were just shows and movies. To humans who knew what to listen for, they were instructions. Marcus Webb sat in the captain's chair of his freighter, the steady hand, reviewing his cargo manifest. Officially, he carried industrial components bound for a manufacturing world 3 systems away. The manifest was accurate. The components were real, but hidden among those components were communication devices, each one carefully shielded from detection. Marcus had been making runs like this for 12 years. No one had ever questioned him. His first officer, a woman named Linda Reeves, entered the bridge carrying 2 cups of coffee. "We're cleared for departure in 40 minutes, she said. Marcus nodded, accepting the coffee. "Good. Let's make sure everything is secured properly." "Everything is always secured properly," Linda said with a slight smile. "I know," Marcus replied. "But today let's be extra careful." Linda's smile widened just a fraction. She understood. Today was different, even though it looked exactly the same as any other day. In a research station orbiting a distant star, Dr. Amara Okonkwo stood before a display showing energy readings that made no sense to anyone who didn't know what they were really measuring. Her official research involved stellar radiation patterns. Her actual work was far more interesting. "The calibrations are complete," her assistant said. The assistant was also human. a young man named David Cho who had supposedly failed out of a more prestigious posting. In truth, David Cho had graduated top of his class in communications engineering. Excellent, Amara said. Begin the next phase of testing. The testing involved equipment that looked like scientific instruments but served another purpose entirely. Equipment that could coordinate signals across vast distances. Equipment that had been disguised as research tools for 8 years. Back on Apex Prime, in a small apartment in the lower city, a junior council analyst named Krill stared at his screens with growing concern. Krill was a mantis-like creature from a cold world, and he had worked in statistical analysis for 15 years. He was good at noticing patterns, and he was noticing a pattern now. Human travel between systems had increased by 7% over the past month. Not much, but noticeable. Human workers were requesting transfers at slightly higher rates than usual. Again, not alarming by itself, but combined with other data points, it suggested something. Krill brought his concerns to his supervisor, a tired-looking amphibian named Gloss. The humans are moving around more than usual, Krill said, displaying his data on a shared screen. Gloss barely looked at it. Movement within normal parameters? Technically, yes, but then it's not a concern, Gloss interrupted. The humans are compliant. They always have been. You're seeing patterns where none exist. But if we look at the aggregate data, Krill, I have 17 other reports to review today. Unless you have evidence of actual criminal activity or rebellion, I cannot justify an investigation. The humans are fine. They've been fine for 300 years. Krill returned to his desk unsatisfied, but he was a junior analyst. His opinion carried no weight. He made a note in his personal files and moved on to other work. As the 3 suns of Apex Prime began to set, the council members gathered for an opening ceremony for their anniversary celebrations. Fireworks exploded in the sky. Music played from 1,000 speakers. Councillor Vexthar stood on a balcony, looking out over the crowds below, feeling the certainty of his power. 5,000 years, he said to the councillor beside him, and we will endure 5,000 more. Nothing can challenge us now. The other councillor made a sound of agreement. Neither of them noticed that the human workers who had set up the ceremony had all requested transfers to other duties immediately afterward. Neither of them saw that human population levels in the capital city had dropped by 3% in the past week. Neither of them thought to question why. In orbit above Apex Prime, Marcus Webb's freighter departed on schedule, joining a dozen other human ships leaving the system. In 100 other systems, thousands more ships were doing the same. Each departure was logged, processed, and approved. Each one was completely legal and ordinary. And across human space, in homes and workplaces, on ships and stations, millions of people went about their business quietly. They smiled when expected to smile. They bowed when expected to bow. They served efficiently and without complaint, just as they had for 300 years, just as the council expected them to continue forever. The music played on. The fireworks continued, and no one in power noticed that something fundamental had shifted. The machinery of empire continued to turn, smooth and efficient, but deep within that machinery, key pieces were beginning to quietly move away. 3 weeks had passed since the anniversary celebration. The council continued its routines with the same comfortable certainty it had maintained for millennia. Reports came in, decisions were made, and the empire functioned as it always had. Or so it appeared. Marcus Webb guided the steady hand through a relatively empty region of space, far from major trade routes. According to his flight plan, he was experiencing engine trouble and had dropped out of faster-than-light travel to make repairs. This was common enough not to raise suspicion. Ships broke down. Repairs took time. What was less common was the 17 other freighters that had also stopped in the same region, all reporting similar technical difficulties. All ships are in position, Linda Reeves reported from the sensor station. The last one just arrived, Marcus nodded. Begin secure communications protocol. The steady hand wasn't actually experiencing engine trouble. Instead, its cargo bay had transformed into a communications hub, with equipment that had been disguised as industrial components now assembled into its true form. Similar transformations were occurring on the other ships. This is steady hand to all vessels, Marcus broadcast on an encrypted channel. Status report, please. One by one, the captains checked in. They were carrying more than cargo. They were carrying families, scientists, engineers, and fabrication equipment. Everything needed to build something new, far from the Council's eyes. Rendezvous Point Beta is ready to receive you, Marcus continued. Dr. Okonkwo's station will coordinate the next phase. Safe travels, everyone. The ships acknowledged, and one by one their engines mysteriously recovered from their technical problems. They departed in different directions toward different destinations, each one part of a larger pattern that no single observer would notice. On Apex Prime, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before a council subcommittee that dealt with agricultural policy. 7 counselors sat in elevated chairs, most of them looking bored before she even began speaking. Agricultural quotas were among the most tedious subjects in galactic governance. Honored counselors, Sarah began, her voice soft and respectful. I come before you today to discuss grain production standards on human colony worlds. One counselor actually yawned. Another checked a personal communication device. This was exactly what Sarah wanted. For the next 4 hours, she presented detailed charts and graphs about wheat yields, soil composition, and seasonal growing patterns. She spoke in a monotone voice, deliberately making the material as dry as possible. She asked for consideration of proposals that would require extensive review and committee approval, processes that would take months. While she spoke, human ships were departing from 50 different council worlds. While she droned on about irrigation systems, human technicians were training their alien replacements on critical systems, using the excuse of routine knowledge transfer. While she requested a follow-up meeting about fertilizer regulations, human families were packing their belongings and booking passage to various destinations. All of it was legal, all of it was procedural, all of it followed the proper channels. When Sarah finally finished her presentation, the lead counselor looked relieved. Your proposals will be taken under advisement, he said quickly. The committee will review your materials and provide a response within 6 to 8 weeks. Thank you, honored counselor, Sarah said, bowing slightly. Would it be possible to schedule a follow-up presentation about livestock management practices? The counselor's face fell, but protocol demanded he agree. Yes, of course. Submit a request through the proper channels. Sarah bowed again and left. Behind her, the counselors immediately began discussing literally anything else. None of them would remember the details of her presentation. None of them would think about it again until forced to. That was the point. At Dr. Amara Okonkwo's research station, the daily operations continued without apparent change. Scientists studied stellar radiation. Experiments were conducted. Data was collected and analyzed. Everything looked normal. But in a section of the station labeled as equipment storage, something else was happening. Ships were arriving at irregular intervals, transferring their passengers and cargo before departing again. The station's sensors had been carefully adjusted to not report these arrivals to automated monitoring systems. We're approaching capacity, David Cho informed Amara as they reviewed the hidden sections of the station. We need to start moving people to the secondary locations. Agreed, Amara said. Begin the transfers tonight. Small groups, staggered departures, nothing that will show up as unusual on traffic scans. What about the council monitoring station 2 systems away? Amara smiled slightly. They've been watching the same stellar radiation readings for 6 years. 3 of their analysts have transferred to other posts because they were so bored. The remaining staff barely looks at their screens anymore. We've been very careful to be extremely boring, David laughed quietly. Boring, right. Like the modified engines we've been testing. Those are purely theoretical research, Amara said with mock seriousness. We're years away from any practical application. They both knew that was a lie. The engines worked. They worked very well, and they were being installed on ships across human space. In the Council's central bureaucracy, data was accumulating. Travel records showed increased human movement. Work rosters indicated higher than normal turnover in human positions. Supply chains registered minor irregularities in human industrial output. Individually, none of these things meant anything. Together, they painted a picture, but no one was looking at them together. Junior analyst Krill tried again to raise his concerns. He had spent his personal time compiling data from 17 different departments, showing a clear pattern of human population movement away from council-controlled worlds. The numbers are outside normal variance, he explained to his supervisor Gloss. Something is happening. Gloss looked at the data for exactly 30 seconds. Human population in council space has decreased by 12% over the past 3 weeks. This is within acceptable parameters for a species of their size. They're probably experiencing some internal migration patterns. Humans do that sometimes. They're restless creatures. But 12% in 3 weeks. Krill, the Council has governed for 5,000 years. Do you really think the humans of all species are suddenly doing something concerning? They're the most compliant species we have. They've never caused a single major incident. This is normal variation. I would like to request a formal investigation. Gloss's expression hardened. An investigation requires evidence of wrongdoing. Movement between systems is not wrongdoing. Requesting job transfers is not wrongdoing. Family relocations are not wrongdoing. You're wasting department resources chasing shadows. I'm officially noting your request and officially denying it. Focus on your assigned work. Krill returned to his station, frustrated but powerless. He made another note in his personal files. The pattern continued to grow. On a manufacturing world called Kellis 9, the human section supervisor called a meeting with her staff. There were 43 humans working in the facility, all of them essential to its operation. They maintained the automated systems, programmed the machines, and handled quality control. I've received transfer orders for 30 of you, the supervisor announced. Effective immediately. Congratulations on your new postings. The alien facility manager was shocked. 30, all at once. This will cripple our production schedule. I apologize for the inconvenience, the supervisor said calmly. The transfers came through the proper channels. All paperwork is in order. I've arranged for basic training programs for replacement workers. They should be operational within 2 to 3 months. 2 to 3 months? Our quotas will be met to the best of our ability with remaining staff, the supervisor interrupted. I'm sure you understand that we cannot refuse legitimate transfer orders. The alien manager wanted to argue but couldn't. Everything was legal. Everything was proper. He couldn't actually prevent the transfers without violating council regulations. By the end of the day, 30 humans had departed Kellis 9. The facility continued operating, but efficiency dropped by 40% within hours. The remaining human workers did their best, but there simply weren't enough of them. Similar scenes were playing out across hundreds of worlds. Humans weren't disappearing. They weren't running away in the night. They were leaving through proper channels, with proper documentation, following proper procedures, and the Council's own bureaucracy made it nearly impossible to stop them or even to recognize the pattern quickly. Counselor, Vexthar reviewed the day's reports from his personal chambers. He noted briefly that human populations in Council space had decreased. 12% was unusual but not alarming. He dictated a memo to have it investigated in 6 to 8 weeks and moved on to other matters. The anniversary celebrations continued. The Council met and made decisions. The Empire functioned. But across human space, the quiet exodus continued. Ships departed daily. Families relocated. Workers transferred. All of it legal. All of it documented. All of it according to procedure. And in the empty spaces between Council worlds, things were being built. Stations were expanding. Ships were being modified. Supplies were being stockpiled. An infrastructure was taking shape. Hidden in plain sight among the back, the emergency council session was called at dawn. Councillor Vexthar arrived to find the chamber already filled with agitated members, all speaking over each other. The usual calm order had been replaced by something he hadn't seen in decades. Actual concern. Silence, Vexthar commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. The chamber quieted. What has happened? A pale-looking aide stepped forward, carrying a data tablet that trembled slightly in his hands. The final analysis is complete, honored Counselor. Human population levels in Council-controlled space have decreased by 89% over the past 6 weeks. The chamber erupted again. Vexthar raised a hand for silence, but his mind was racing. 89%. That wasn't migration. That wasn't normal variation. That was an exodus. How did we not see this? Demanded a counselor from the crystalline worlds. How does an entire species disappear and we only notice now? They didn't disappear, the aide said quietly. They left legally through proper channels. Every departure was documented and approved. They followed all procedures. Show me their current locations, Vexthar ordered. The aide activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots represented human populations. 6 weeks ago, those dots had been spread throughout Council space, concentrated on conquered worlds and integrated colonies. Now almost all the red dots had moved to the edge of Council territory and beyond. They've sealed their borders, another aide reported. All human-controlled space is now designated as restricted. They're not allowing Council ships to enter without explicit permission. Permission? Vexthar's voice was dangerous. They ask us for permission? No, honored counselor. They require us to ask them for permission. The distinction was significant. The humans weren't requesting anything. They were declaring independence. Get Ambassador Chen on communication, Vexthar ordered. Ambassador Chen departed Apex Prime 4 days ago, the aide replied. Her diplomatic credentials were formally returned through proper channels. Her replacement has not yet been appointed. 4 days ago, she had been here in this very chamber, boring them with agricultural reports, and she had already been preparing to leave. Find her. Contact her. Contact anyone in human space who can explain what is happening. The aide scrambled to comply. Minutes passed in tense silence. Finally, a communication specialist reported success. We have a response, honored counselor. It's a recorded message from Ambassador Chen. Play it. Sarah Chen's face appeared on the display. She looked different than she had in the council chambers. Her posture was straighter. Her voice was firmer. She no longer looked like someone who could be ignored. Honored members of the Galactic Council, she began. This message serves as formal notification that humanity is withdrawing from the Council's authority. All human worlds, stations, and territories are hereby declared independent and sovereign. We are grateful for the peace and stability we have enjoyed under your protection, but we have decided to chart our own course going forward. We wish you well and hope to maintain friendly relations with all species. This communication concludes humanity's formal relationship with the Council. Thank you for your time. The message ended. The chamber was silent. That's it? Someone finally said. They just leave? Get the fleet, Vexthar said coldly. We will restore order. Over the next 3 days, the Council mobilized its military forces. 60% of the entire fleet was directed toward human space. It was an overwhelming show of force, more than enough to crush any resistance. The Council had used smaller fleets to conquer entire species. But strange reports began arriving. On worlds the humans had evacuated, critical systems were failing. A station's life support system malfunctioned, saved only by emergency protocols. A trade hub's logistics network crashed, stranding thousands of ships. Military communication systems experienced mysterious delays. What's happening? Vexthar demanded. Junior analyst Krill, who had finally been called to brief the Council, explained with barely suppressed frustration. The humans were integrated into our infrastructure more deeply than anyone realized. They maintained systems across thousands of facilities. They programmed our computers. They calibrated our sensors. They trained our technicians. And when they left, they took that expertise with them. So train more technicians. We are honored counselor. But it takes time. The humans spent 300 years learning our systems. They became essential, and no one noticed because they were so quiet about it. Vexthar wanted to rage, but he forced himself to focus. The fleet will handle this. Once the humans see our military power, they will submit. The Council's armada jumped into human space exactly 1 week after Sarah Chen's message. They expected to find frightened colonies, desperate defenses, and quick surrender. Instead, they found something impossible. Fleet Commander Thex stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His sensors were showing defensive platforms surrounding every human world. Not simple defenses, but sophisticated military-grade installations. The humans had a unified fleet in formation, and his computer was counting ships. How many? He asked his tactical officer. 3,412 combat-capable vessels, Commander. We have 1,100. That's impossible. We monitor all shipbuilding in the galaxy. Where did they get 3,000 ships? Unknown, Commander. But they're here, and they're fully armed. A communication request came through. Commander Thex accepted it, and a human face appeared on his screen. A woman in a military uniform with stars on her collar. Admiral Catherine Zhao, according to the identification tag. Welcome to human space, Commander Thex, she said politely. I'm afraid you're trespassing. Please turn your fleet around and return to Council territory. You cannot be serious, Thex replied. You cannot possibly believe you can defeat the Council. Defeat? Admiral Zhao looked puzzled. Commander, we don't want to defeat anyone. We want to be left alone. Your fleet is outnumbered 3-1. Your supply lines are stretched, and you're a long way from reinforcements. I'm giving you a chance to leave peacefully. The Council does not retreat from subject species. We're not subjects anymore, Zhao said simply. You may fire the first shot if you choose. But I promise you, Commander, you won't fire the last. Think carefully about what you do next. Commander Thex muted the communication and looked at his tactical display again. His fleet was designed for overwhelming force against weaker opponents. It was not designed for a peer conflict against an enemy that outnumbered them significantly. Commander, his tactical officer said quietly, even if we win, our losses would be catastrophic. And I'm not certain we would win. Thex had been in the military for 40 years. He knew when he was being offered an honorable escape. Prepare to withdraw, he ordered. Full retreat. We need to report this to the Council. Shall we fire a warning shot first? Show we're serious? No, Thex said firmly. We're not starting a war we cannot finish. Retreat. Now. The Council fleet turned and jumped back into faster-than-light travel. Not a single shot had been fired. Not a single ship had been damaged. The humans watched them go in silence. When news reached Apex Prime, the Council chamber descended into chaos. Arguments broke out between members. Accusations were thrown. How had this happened? Who was responsible? Why hadn't anyone seen this coming? Junior Analyst Krill sat at his station, vindicated but taking no pleasure in it. He had tried to warn them. They hadn't listened, but the worst news was yet to come. A counselor from the mining world stood and called for attention. The humans are not our only problem, he announced grimly. 17 other species have now declared independence movements. They saw the humans leave successfully and they want the same. Crush them, Vexthar said immediately. With what forces? 60% of our fleet just retreated from human space. The remaining 40% cannot handle widespread rebellion. Reports continued to flood in. On a dozen worlds, workers were striking. On a dozen more, local governments were declaring autonomy. Species that had been quiet for centuries were suddenly demanding freedom. The humans had done more than leave. They had shattered the Council's greatest weapon, the appearance of invincibility. In a private chamber, Counselor Vexthar finally allowed himself to look at the complete intelligence reports. The ones that detailed just how long the humans had been planning this, the hidden meanings in their entertainment broadcasts, the coded messages in their art and literature, the way every human worker had known exactly what to do and when to do it. 300 years. They had been planning this for 300 years. Every human who had smiled and bowed. Every human who had served quietly. Every human who had seemed content. All of them had been waiting. All of them had been preparing. All of them had been part of a plan so patient and so coordinated that the Council never saw it coming. Vexithar watched footage of human ships departing, one by one, in perfect legal order. He watched families leaving with their belongings. He watched workers training their replacements. He finally understood. The humans hadn't needed to fight because they had already won. They had made themselves essential, learned everything about the Council's systems, and then quietly removed themselves in a way that couldn't be stopped. And now the entire galaxy ground noise of normal huma. Commander Thex's flagship returned to Council space to find everything had changed. The confidence and certainty that had defined the Council for millennia had evaporated in the weeks since the fleet's retreat. Now, every day brought new problems that seemed impossible to solve. The Council chamber meetings had become shouting matches. Counselor Vexithar tried to maintain order, but even his authority was being questioned. Species that had been silent for generations now demanded to be heard. The machinery of Empire was grinding to a halt. The Kelly's manufacturing sector reports production has fallen by 60%, an aide announced to the assembled Council. The humans who maintained the systems are gone, and the replacement workers cannot match their efficiency. Then punish the facility managers for incompetence, Vexthar snapped. The managers are doing everything they can, honored counselor. The humans had 3 centuries to learn our systems. The replacements have had 3 weeks. It will take years to reach the same level of expertise. We don't have years. Another aide stepped forward nervously. The trade hub at Sector 7 has experienced a complete logistics failure. 17,000 ships are stranded in queue. The automated routing system crashed and no one knows how to repair it. The humans who built it are gone. Find the technical documentation, follow the repair procedures. The documentation exists, but much of it was written by humans using terminology and methods that our current staff cannot fully understand. They're working on it, but we need the humans. Vexthar finished bitterly. That's what you're telling me. We need them back. The aide said nothing, which was answer enough. Vexthar made a decision he never thought he would make. Open diplomatic channels with the humans. Offer them incentives to return. Better trade agreements. More autonomy. Anything they want. The communication went out within hours. The council offered humanity generous terms. They would be given self-governance within the council's framework. They would have representation with actual voting power. They would receive preferential trade status. All they had to do was return. The response came from Admiral Catherine Zhao, not a diplomat. She appeared on the screen in her military uniform, her expression polite but firm. We appreciate the council's generous offer, she said, but we must decline. We left because we wanted independence, not better terms of subjugation. We will not return to council space. You don't understand, the council's spokesperson said desperately. We need your technical expertise. Systems are failing across council space. People are suffering. Then I suggest you train your own technicians, Zhao replied, or ask those who remain for their help. We're happy to provide training materials and technical documentation. We'll even sell you the equipment you need at fair market prices. But we will not return to serve the council. This is unreasonable. You're condemning millions to hardship. Zhao's expression hardened. The council condemned millions to subjugation for 5,000 years. We spent 3 centuries as your servants, maintaining your systems while you took credit for the stability we provided. We're done serving. Learn to take care of yourselves. The communication ended. The council's diplomatic outreach had failed completely. But humanity's response to the broader galaxy was very different. While they refused to help the council, they reached out to other species who were struggling. Marcus Webb's freighter, along with hundreds of others, began carrying humanitarian aid to worlds that were attempting independence. On a world called Thessar, a rebellion against the council had resulted in critical infrastructure failures. The local population was suffering from power shortages and failing life support systems. The council fleet couldn't reach them in time, and the local government was overwhelmed. Human ships arrived carrying emergency power generators, medical supplies, and technical experts. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't demand political concessions. They just helped. Why? The Thessar governor asked Marcus as supplies were unloaded. Why help us when you refuse to help the council? Marcus smiled. The council wanted servants. You need neighbors. There's a difference. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. Humans provided technical assistance, shared knowledge, and offered support to species attempting to break free from the council, but they never tried to take control. They never demanded loyalty. They just helped and then left. Dr. Amara Okonkwo had transformed her research station into something else entirely. It was now a center for scientific cooperation, where researchers from multiple species worked together on projects that benefited everyone. The discoveries made there were shared freely, not hoarded for advantage. The council is calling us traitors, David Cho mentioned as he reviewed incoming communications. They say we're destroying galactic stability. Stability built on subjugation isn't real stability, Amara replied. It's just delayed conflict. What we're building now might be messy, but at least it's honest. She was right about it being messy. The collapse of council authority left power vacuums across the galaxy. Some species handled independence well. Others struggled. There were conflicts, disputes, and confusion. The orderly empire was being replaced by something chaotic and uncertain, but it was also being replaced by something with potential. Species were talking to each other directly, not through council intermediaries. Trade agreements were being negotiated between equals. Alliances were forming based on mutual interest rather than forced compliance. Sarah Chen emerged from her quiet retirement for one final public appearance. She addressed the galaxy through an open broadcast that anyone could receive. Her message was simple but powerful. For 300 years my people smiled and bowed, she said. We served efficiently and quietly. The council thought we were content. They thought we were domesticated. They were wrong. We were patient. We watched and learned. We studied your systems, your technology, and your weaknesses. We became essential because we knew that one day we would need to leave. And when that day came, we wanted to do it without firing a single shot. We succeeded, and now other species are following our example. The council calls this chaos. We call it freedom. The galaxy is changing, and that change is long overdue. To the Council, we say, you had 5,000 years to rule with wisdom and justice. You chose to rule with force and fear instead. Now your empire is collapsing, and you have no one to blame but yourselves. To everyone else, we say, you were always the ones with the power. You always outnumbered your oppressors. The only thing that kept you down was the belief that you couldn't win. That belief is gone now. You can be free if you choose to be. We don't want to rule you. We don't want to replace the Council with a human empire. We just want to live free and help others do the same. The galaxy belongs to all of us, not just the powerful few. The message spread across every communication network. It was translated into 1,000 languages. It became a rallying cry for independence movements everywhere. On Apex Prime, the Council fractured. Hardliners like Vexthar demanded total war against the rebels. Moderates recognized that the Empire was finished and pushed for negotiated settlements. The arguments became so heated that some councilors stopped attending sessions altogether. The Council's fleet, once the greatest military force in the galaxy, found itself unable to act. They couldn't fight the humans without catastrophic losses. They couldn't suppress every rebellion simultaneously. They couldn't even maintain their own ships properly without the human technicians who had kept everything running smoothly. Junior Analyst Krill was promoted to Senior Analyst, though he took no satisfaction in it. His job now was to document the Empire's collapse in careful detail. Every day more territories declared independence. Every week the Council's authority shrank further. We could have listened to you, his supervisor Gloss said quietly one day. When you first noticed the pattern, we could have stopped this. No, Krill replied. We couldn't have. Even if we had noticed earlier, we couldn't have stopped millions of humans from legally exercising their rights to travel and transfer jobs. The humans didn't break any laws. They just used our own systems against us. We built the cage we're now trapped in. Councillor Vexithar stood alone in his chambers, looking out over Apex Prime. The city still sparkled under its 3 suns, but the illusion of permanence had been shattered. He finally allowed himself to acknowledge the truth. The humans hadn't won through superior force. They had won through patience, planning, and unity. Every human had played their part. From the lowest maintenance worker to Ambassador Chen herself, they had all known the plan. They had all kept the secret. For 300 years, they had pretended to be content while preparing for this moment. And when the moment came, they had moved as one, quietly, legally, and irresistibly. The Council had believed they were untouchable. They had been wrong. And now the entire galaxy knew it. The age of empire was ending. Something new was beginning. Built not on domination but on cooperation. The humans had shown everyone that change was possible, that the powerful could be defied. That freedom was within reach for those brave enough to take it. Vexthar turned away from the window. He had paperwork to sign, territory to cede, power to relinquish. The empire would survive, but only as a shadow of what it had been. The humans had gone quietly, and T6 months had passed since the humans left Council space. The galaxy looked very different now. Where once there had been one massive empire controlling thousands of worlds, there was now a patchwork of independent territories, loose alliances, and new nations finding their way. The Council still existed, but its authority extended to perhaps 1/10 of what it once controlled. Some species had chosen to remain, finding value in the structure and stability the Council provided. But they remained as partners now, not subjects. The relationship had fundamentally changed. On a space station called Unity 1, representatives from 43 different species gathered for what was being called the Free Worlds Assembly. It wasn't a government. It wasn't an empire. It was something new. Something that didn't have a proper name yet. A place where species could talk, trade, and coordinate without anyone having the power to command anyone else. Marcus Webb stood in the observation deck, watching ships come and go. His freighter, the Steady Hand, was docked nearby, loaded with medical supplies bound for a world still recovering from its transition to independence. He didn't charge for these runs anymore. He didn't need to. The Free Worlds Assembly had created a fund to support humanitarian efforts, contributed to by dozens of species who wanted to help build something better. Still can't believe we pulled it off, Linda Reeves said, joining him at the window. 300 years of planning, Marcus replied. Every generation passing the knowledge to the next. Every family keeping the secret. It's the most ambitious thing humans have ever done. And we did it without firing a shot. That was the important part. We had to prove that change was possible without war. If we'd fought the Council, won, and taken their place, we would have just become the next empire. This way we showed everyone that freedom is achievable, that it's worth working for. Linda nodded. Have you heard from the colonies on the rim? The ones we helped set up? Thriving. They're building something interesting out there. A network of independent worlds with no central authority at all. Just mutual cooperation and trade. It might work, or it might not. But at least they get to try. On Apex Prime, the council chamber was quiet. Only 12 counselors were present today, a fraction of what once attended. Counselor Vexthar sat in his elevated seat, looking older and tired. The anniversary celebration seemed like a lifetime ago, though only half a year had passed. The Kelly's sector has stabilized, an aide reported. Production is at 70% of original levels and improving. The new technicians are learning. 70%, Vexthar repeated. 3 years ago, that would have been considered a disaster. Now it's a victory. How far we have fallen, or how far we had climbed above our actual capabilities, another counselor suggested. It was one of the moderates who had pushed for negotiation rather than war. We relied on subject species to maintain systems we didn't understand. We took credit for stability we didn't create. Perhaps this is simply reality asserting itself. Vexthar wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. The counselor was right. The empire had been built on exploitation disguised as order. When the exploited left, the illusion collapsed. What news from the humans? Vexthar asked. They continue to provide humanitarian aid across the former empire. They're also offering technical training programs to any species that requests them. No charge, no strings attached. They just help. Why? The aide shrugged. Their ambassador said something about paying it forward. I don't fully understand the human concept. But it seems they believe that helping others now will create a better galaxy for everyone later. Vexthar thought about that. It was so different from how the Council had operated. The Council's philosophy had been simple. Accumulate power, maintain control, extract resources. The humans seem to be operating on entirely different principles. Have there been any requests from the humans? Anything they want from us? Only one, honored counselor. They've asked us to release all historical records related to conquered species. They want to help other species recover their cultural heritage that the Council suppressed. Even that was pointed. The Council had deliberately erased histories and traditions to make subject species easier to control. Now the humans wanted to undo that damage. Grant their request, Vexthar said quietly. We have no reason to refuse. At Dr. Amara Okonkwo's station, which had been officially renamed the Cooperative Research Initiative, scientists from 27 species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the Council's rule. Knowledge flowed freely. Discoveries were shared immediately. Competition had been replaced by cooperation. We've made a breakthrough in medical nanotechnology, David Cho announced excitedly. Combined work from human, Thessar, and Qualine researchers. This could revolutionize healthcare across the galaxy. Then publish it, Amara said. Full open access. Let everyone benefit. The Council used to classify this kind of research. Keep it secret to maintain their technological advantage. We're not the Council. Publish it. The paper went out within hours, available to anyone who wanted to read it. Within days, research teams across the galaxy were building on the work, adding their own innovations. Progress was happening faster than ever because no one was hoarding knowledge anymore. Sarah Chen sat in her garden on Earth, enjoying retirement properly this time. She was 68 years old and had spent 40 of those years playing the role of meek diplomat, while coordinating the greatest peaceful revolution in history. She was done with that life now, but she still received visitors. Today, it was a young woman named Jennifer Rao, a historian writing a book about the quiet centuries. How did everyone keep the secret? Jennifer asked. 300 years, millions of people, and the Council never found out. How? Sarah smiled. We learned from Earth's own history. Successful resistance movements always used cultural transmission. We embedded the plan in our stories, our music, our art. Every human child grew up learning certain tales that seemed like simple entertainment but contained coded information. By the time you were old enough to understand what you were being told, you'd already internalized the lessons. Lessons like what? Patience, unity, the long view. We taught our children that freedom was worth waiting for. that every generation had a role to play in a plan that might not come to fruition in their lifetime. We taught them to smile and bow while never forgetting who they really were. Some people say it was manipulation, that you controlled an entire species across generations. Maybe, Sarah acknowledged, but it was voluntary manipulation. Every human could have chosen to reject the plan, to tell the council what we were doing. None did. Because deep down everyone understood that what we were building was worth the wait. Jennifer made notes on her datapad. What do you think happens now? With the council broken and so many new governments forming? Chaos probably. Mistakes, conflicts, growing pains of freedom. But also opportunity. The galaxy gets to try something new. Maybe it'll work better than the old system. Maybe it won't. But at least now species get to choose their own path. And humanity? What's our role in all this? Helper, neighbor, friend, but never ruler. We made that clear from the beginning. We'll share what we know, support those who ask for help, and defend ourselves if necessary. But we're not building an empire. One empire was enough. Across the galaxy, in 1,000 different locations, the effects of humanity's quiet revolution continued to unfold. Some species thrived in their newfound independence. Others struggled. Some rebuilt the old systems with new faces. Others experimented with radical new forms of governance. The Thessar established a direct democracy using technology the humans helped them develop. The Qualine formed a confederation of autonomous worlds. The methane breathers created an alliance based purely on trade relationships with no political authority at all. Not everything worked. There were conflicts over resources, disagreements about borders, and the occasional military confrontation. The galaxy was messier now than it had been under the Council's iron rule, but it was also freer. And that made all the difference. Junior analyst Krill, now senior director of historical documentation, spent his days recording the Empire's fall in exhaustive detail. Future generations would study his work to understand how an empire that lasted 5,000 years could collapse in less than a year. The answer was simple. The empire had been hollow. It looked strong from the outside, but inside it was held together by the labor of people who wanted to leave. When they did, everything fell apart. The Council believed they were untouchable, Krill wrote in his final report. They believed their power was absolute and eternal. They never understood that power only exists when people acknowledge it. The humans stopped acknowledging it and everything else followed. On Unity 1 station, a young alien child looked out at the stars with her grandfather. She was from a species that had been under Council rule for 2,000 years. She had been born into freedom and knew nothing else. "Grandfather," she asked, "what was it like when the Council ruled everything?" The old alien thought carefully about how to answer. "It was orderly," he finally said. "Everything had its place. Everyone knew their role. But no one was happy. We just didn't realize the galaxy would never be the same."